when the most feared billionaire in New York fell to his knees in front of me and growled, "Mine," I did what any rational person would do. I laughed. Not a nervous giggle, no. A hysterical guffaw, the kind that makes your stomach ache and tears stream down your face. Because there I was, Tamsin Vane, the night shift janitor, trapped in a chair that looked straight out of a sci-fi movie, with shackles of light on my wrists and ankles, while the CEO of Sterling Global stared at me as if I were the answer to every prayer he never admitted to making. His eyes glowed gold, real gold, like melted gold coins, like the sun setting behind a forest. And I could swear I heard a low growl vibrating in his chest, something that definitely shouldn't exist in a normal human being. But who was talking about normal? I was the girl who fried cell phones with a handshake, the girl who could never keep a job because, eventually, something always exploded. The girl who had just sat on the most sacred throne in the lupine corporate world because my feet hurt and the chair looked comfortable. And now, apparently, I was hers. His. The alpha's. The throne still purred beneath me, like a giant cat made of metal and obsidian, satisfied with its choice. The lights of the entire building were blinking in a rhythm I could only describe as excited Morse code. Lysander Sterling rose slowly, his eyes still burning with that impossible gold, and I realized my laughter had died somewhere in my throat. Because the way he was looking at me wasn't anger. It wasn't confusion. It was hunger. And I, for the first time in my life of electrical disasters and self-imposed solitude, felt something inside me answer. If you want to know how I, a simple janitor with a knack for destroying electronics, ended up sitting on the sacred throne of a billionaire wolf dynasty, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're hearing me tell this crazy story. Come with me, because this story is mine. But now it's yours too. But for you to understand how I reached that moment, with an alpha at my feet and a throne claiming me as its owner, you need to know the night it all started. The night I made the biggest mistake of my life. Or maybe the best one. I haven't decided yet. 2:17 a.m. I know the exact time because the digital clock in the Sterling Tower lobby flashed right in my face when my headphones died for the third time that week. I pulled them out with a sigh, glaring at the little white plastic circles as if they had personally betrayed me. And they had. I was right in the middle of that song, you know? The one that makes time pass faster while you scrub Italian marble at 2 a.m. The kind of music that makes you pretend you're not on your knees cleaning the floor of a building worth more than everything you'll earn in 10 lifetimes. But nope. Of course not. I pressed the power button. Nothing. Shook them. Nothing. Blew on them like they were an old video game cartridge. Still nothing. Typical. I shoved the dead headphones into the pocket of my uniform, which was 2 sizes too big, because apparently Sterling Global didn't have uniforms for people my size, and returned my attention to the mop. The lobby was immense, all glass and brushed steel, with the kind of minimalism that screamed, "We're too rich to need decoration," the kind of place where even the air felt filtered and judgmental. And right in the center of it all, surrounded by red velvet ropes as if it were a work of art in a museum, stood the throne. I had heard stories about it. Everyone who worked here had. The Moon Throne, they called it. A chair made of dark metal and polished obsidian, with lines that looked like veins running through the structure. They said it was ancient. They said it was sacred. They said only the true alpha and his mate could sit on it. A bunch of nonsense, if you ask me. I leaned on the mop, staring at the thing. At 2 a.m., with no music and my feet throbbing inside my grubby sneakers, that chair looked extremely inviting. Black cushion, wide armrests, a backrest that seemed to embrace whoever sat in it. I looked around. The lobby was empty. The guards were doing their rounds on the 15th floor right now. I knew because I had already memorized their routine. Not for any sinister reason. Just because when you're the invisible girl who cleans the floors at night, you learn the patterns. You become part of the shadows. My feet hurt. A lot. The throne stared back at me. If a chair can stare at someone. The polished obsidian reflected the soft lobby lights, and for an instant, one insane instant, I could swear I saw a bluish glow pulse in the metallic veins. Nonsense. Probably just the reflection of some LED panel. I took a step toward it, then another. My sneakers squeaked on the marble I had just polished, leaving a little mark I'd have to clean again. But suddenly, that didn't seem important. The velvet ropes were easy to duck under. I was small after all. One of the advantages of being underestimated my entire life was fitting into places I shouldn't. Up close, the throne was even more impressive. The metal had a strange smell, like ozone before a storm, like accumulated static electricity. Something familiar, something that made the hairs on my arms stand up in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. I ran my fingers over the armrest. Cold, solid, real, and extremely, irresistibly, stupidly comfortable to look at. Just for a second, I thought. No one will know. I'll sit down, rest my feet for 30 seconds, and then go back to scrubbing this floor until it shines like the security chief's bald head. I turned and sat. The instant my butt touched the seat, the world exploded. Not literally, but close. First came the sound, a deep hum that seemed to come from inside my ribs. Then the light, blue and white lines running through the throne's veins like electric blood, pulsing in a rhythm that matched my heart. And then, before I could even think about getting up, shackles of pure light materialized around my wrists and ankles. I screamed. Or tried to. The sound that came out of my mouth was more of a strangled squeak. I pulled my arms. The shackles didn't budge. I kicked my legs. Nothing. The throne held me like I was a battery snapped into place, and the lights of the entire building, all of them, began to flash. Not randomly flashing. Flashing in a pattern. Short. Short. Long. Short. My hysterical brain, the one that had memorized Morse code during a particularly lonely phase of adolescence, automatically translated F-O-U-N-D. Found what? The throne purred beneath me. I swear on everything sacred. The chair purred, like a giant metal cat that had finally found the right lap. And I was frozen there, eyes probably the size of saucers, heart beating so fast I could feel every pulse in my tingling fingertips. When the elevator went ding, the brushed steel doors opened, and Lysander Sterling walked out. I recognized him immediately, of course. Everyone would. His face was in magazines, the news, inspirational murals the HR department insisted on hanging in the halls. The youngest CEO in Sterling global history. The billionaire who made other billionaires look poor. The man who, according to the whispers among the night shift janitors, was much more than just human. He wore a 3-piece suit even at 2 a.m, because apparently sleeping was for ordinary people. Dark hair perfectly in place. A jaw that could cut glass. And eyes. Forest green eyes that flashed with fury as he marched across the lobby, followed by a man in glasses carrying a tablet, and 3 security guards who looked like they could snap me in half effortlessly. "Why are the lights in my building flashing?" he demanded, his deep voice cutting the air like a blade. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I was testing the ergonomics, Mr. Sterling," I managed to say, my voice an octave higher than normal. 10 out of 10. He stopped. The man in glasses, Barnaby. I remembered the name because he was the only executive who said thank you when I emptied his office trash, nearly bumped into his boss's back. "What?" Lysander began. And then his eyes, those cold, green, winter forest eyes, met mine, and changed. I saw it happen. I saw the green dissolve, swallowed by a warm, brilliant gold, like honey under sunlight, like liquid gold, like something that definitely shouldn't exist in human pupils. The air around him trembled. The guards instinctively took a step back. Even Barnaby paled, his fingers squeezing the tablet hard enough to turn his knuckles white. Lysander inhaled deeply, his nostrils flared. And something on his face, all that controlled fury, all that contained power, broke apart. He fell to his knees. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't intentional. It was as if his legs had simply decided they didn't want to support him anymore, not in the presence of whatever he was feeling. The sound of his knees hitting the marble echoed through the empty lobby, and I remained there, trapped on the still purring throne, watching the most powerful man in the city kneel at my feet. "Mine," he growled. The word vibrated in the air between us, heavy with meaning, loaded with something ancient and immense that I couldn't comprehend. I felt it in my chest. A tug, as if there was an invisible thread connecting my heart to his, and that thread had just been pulled taut. I swallowed hard. "You're what?" I asked, because apparently my mouth hadn't gotten the memo that it was time to shut up. "Employee?" "Yes, unfortunately." His golden eyes blinked. For a second, just 1 second, I saw confusion cross that sculpted face, as if he didn't understand what was happening either, as if his body had acted before his mind could process. Barnaby cleared his throat behind him. "Sir," he said, the carefully neutral voice of someone who had seen a lot of strange things working for Lysander Sterling. "Perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting?" Lysander didn't answer. He was still staring at me, those impossible eyes cataloging every detail of my face as if memorizing a treasure map. My red hair escaping the loose bun, probably looking like a bird's nest with all the static. My crumpled uniform. My cheeks, which I knew were red with shame and something hotter I refused to name. The throne pulsed beneath me, the veins of light responding to his proximity. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the energy shackles dissolved. I could have run. I should have run. That's what any sensible person would do when confronted with a bright-eyed billionaire who had just claimed her as property in the middle of the night. But my feet, the same feet that had brought me to that stupid throne, didn't move. And when Lysander Sterling slowly stood, his gaze still locked on mine, gold fusing back to green, I knew, with a certainty that chilled my spine and set something much deeper alight, that my life as an anonymous janitor had just ended, for better or for worse. Probably for worse. Lysander Sterling's office was on the top floor of the tower, and every second of that elevator ride was an exercise in silent torture. I was pressed into the corner, still gripping my mop like it was a weapon. Lysander occupied the opposite corner, his jaw so tight I could see a muscle pulsing. Barnaby stood in the middle, holding his tablet to his chest like a shield, his eyes darting between us with the expression of someone who desperately wished they were anywhere else. The security guards had stayed behind. Apparently, whatever was happening was too confidential even for them. Great. Wonderful. I was going to be murdered in private. The elevator went ding, and the doors opened to a glass and steel corridor leading to a single dark wood double door. Lysander strode out first, his steps long and precise, and I had to half-trot to keep up because my legs were significantly shorter than his. Barnaby followed, already furiously typing on the tablet. "Cancel my morning meetings," Lysander said without looking back. "All of them, sir?" "All of them." Barnaby swallowed hard. "Sir, the video conference with Tokyo." Lysander stopped so abruptly that I nearly bumped into his back. He turned, and for one terrifying second, I saw that gold flash in his eyes again. "All of them," he repeated, his voice too deep, vibrating in a way that made something in my spine prickle. Barnaby nodded frantically and disappeared through a side door, likely to have a private panic attack. I should have taken the distraction to flee. Instead, I stood there like an idiot as Lysander Sterling pushed open the double doors, revealing the most intimidating office I had ever seen. It was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Manhattan glittering below like a carpet of jewels. A mahogany desk that probably cost more than my apartment, shelves of ancient books, a crystal bar in the corner, and, inexplicably, an oil portrait of a black wolf hanging behind the executive chair. "Sit," Lysander commanded, pointing to one of the leather armchairs facing the desk. I looked at the mop in my hand. I looked at the leather armchair that probably cost more than 6 months of my salary. I looked at him. "I'll get it dirty," I said. He stared at me as if I had spoken an alien language. "Your uniform," he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "Will dirty the armchair?" "Yes." Lysander closed his eyes, breathed deeply through his nose. When he opened his eyes again, they were still green, but there was something there that looked strangely close to amused exasperation. "Sit down," he repeated, his voice slightly softer. "The armchair will survive." I sat, still clutching the mop. Lysander rounded the desk and sat in the executive chair, staring at me over his clasped hands. The low office light cast interesting shadows on his face, highlighting the sharp angles, the mouth that seemed to have forgotten how to smile. He was absurdly handsome, in a cold, inaccessible way, like a museum statue you knew you couldn't touch. Not that I wanted to touch him. Definitely not. "Do you know what happened down there?" he asked. "I sat in a chair I shouldn't have, and it trapped me like a high-tech bear trap." His lips twitched. It wasn't a smile, but it was something. "The moon throne," he said, "has existed for over 500 years. It was forged by the first alpha of the Sterling lineage using methods lost to time. It recognizes only two types of people, the legitimate alpha and his destined mate." I blinked again. "You're... what?" The side door opened, and Barnaby entered carrying a laptop, looking slightly less on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He set the device on Lysander's desk and started typing. "I prepared the presentation, sir." "Presentation," I repeated, my voice sounding distant even to myself. Barnaby rotated the laptop so I could see the screen. The opening slide read, in professional lettering, "Looping Myths for Beginners, an Introduction to the Mate Bond." "You're kidding me," I said. No one laughed. Barnaby clicked to the next slide. There was a diagram, with arrows, and a flowchart explaining something called bond recognition. "Wolves," Barnaby began in the voice of someone who had given this lecture before, "recognize their destined mates through a combination of factors: soul resonance, ancestral genetic compatibility, and confirmation through sacred artifacts. In the case of the Sterling clan, the moon throne serves as the definitive catalyst." I raised my hand as if I were in school. Barnaby stopped. "Yes?" "Wolves," I said. "You keep saying wolves." Silence. Lysander leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Miss Vane." "Tamsin," I corrected automatically. "Miss Vane was my mother, and she's dead, so—" "Tamsin," he repeated, and the way my name sounded in his voice made something strange happen in my spine. "I am a wolf, an alpha, and you, apparently, are my destined mate." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Wolves," I said for the third time, as if repeating it would make the word make sense. "Like werewolves?" "We prefer the term shapeshifters," Barnaby offered helpfully. "Werewolf has very cinematic connotations. Too full moon, too uncontrolled, too—" "Barnaby," Lysander interrupted. "Yes, sir. Silencing myself, sir." I looked from one to the other. My mind was doing that thing it did when I overloaded, that white buzzing of too much information, insufficient processing. I could feel the familiar tingling in my fingers, the warning that my body was about to do something I couldn't control. I need a minute," I said, and my voice came out strange, electric. Lysander stood up immediately, rounding the desk. "Tamsin, are you all right? You're pale." "Don't come near me," I warned, holding up my hands. "When I get nervous, bad things happen." He stopped. "What kind of bad things?" As if answering the question, the office lights flickered. Barnaby's laptop emitted a high-pitched squeal, and the screen froze. The elevator outside made a clunk sound suggesting it had stopped working. "That kind," I said miserably. Barnaby looked at the dead laptop, looked at me, looked at Lysander. "Sir, she is a—" "I know what she is," Lysander said, and there was something in his voice, something hot and hungry, that made my stomach flip. He approached again, ignoring my warning. I backed up until my back hit the armchair. "Your phone," he said, holding out his hand. "Give it to me." Why? "So I can put in my number," he said, as if it were obvious. "You are my mate. I need to be able to contact you." I looked at his outstretched hand, then at my pocket, where my cheap cell phone rested. "I wouldn't touch that," I warned. "Why?" "Because I fry electronics," I said slowly, as if he were slow, "especially when I'm stressed. And I'm very stressed right now." Lysander frowned. He took something out of his own pocket, an iPhone that looked like it cost more than 3 months of my rent, and held it out to me. "Then take mine," he said. "Put in your number." I didn't touch the phone. Instead, I reached out my hand to push his away, an instinctive gesture, and our fingers brushed. The iPhone exploded. Not in flames or shards, thank God. But the screen went completely white, then black, and then started emitting a high-pitched hiss as wisps of smoke drifted out of the side. Lysander dropped the device reflexively, and it fell onto the expensive carpet, still sizzling. We both looked at the smoking phone. Then we looked at each other. That, Lysander said slowly, was a $10,000 prototype. My mouth moved before my brain could intervene. Discount my wages. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second. And then, impossible but true, the corner of his mouth curved. It wasn't a full smile, but it was something. A crack in the marble facade. Barnaby, he said without taking his eyes off me, research everything about human batteries. Human batteries, sir? People who store and discharge electrical energy. Lysander tilted his head, studying me as if I were a fascinating puzzle. I read about it once, thought it was a myth. I'm not a myth, I said, a little defensive. I'm just defective. Something flashed through his eyes, too fast for me to identify. You are not defective, he said, his voice deep and certain in a way that made my heart stumble. You are rare. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever called my problem rare. Scary, yes. Weird, often. Dangerous. More times than I cared to count. But never rare. Never as if it were something precious. Lysander stepped away, returning behind the desk, and the distance allowed me to breathe again. He sat down, his fingers tapping the mahogany in a thoughtful rhythm. You are my mate, he said. The throne confirmed it. My wolf confirmed it. That will not change. I opened my mouth to protest, but he continued. But you are also something more. Something that needs protection. There are people who would pay fortunes for someone with your abilities. People who would do anything to capture you. A chill ran down my spine. Capture? Lysander nodded. You need to be under my protection, officially. And how exactly would that work? I asked. I'm a janitor. You are... you. Engagement. Barnaby said suddenly, looking at his tablet. A corporate engagement would solve multiple problems, sir. It would legitimize her presence at your side, offer legal and social protection, and silence the rumors about Blythe Halloway. I froze. Blythe Halloway. I knew that name. Everyone did. The heiress who had been romantically linked to Lysander for months. The perfect, polished woman of impeccable lineage. You have a fiancé, I said. Not officially, Lysander replied. It is a corporate alliance. There is no bond. But you... There is no bond, he repeated, and this time his voice was hard as steel. She is not my mate. You are. The words hung in the air between us, too heavy to ignore. I thought about my tiny apartment, the bills stacked on the kitchen table, the landlord who had threatened to evict me last month. I thought about the jobs I had lost, one after the other, because eventually I always fried something important. I thought about the solitude that had been my constant companion since my parents died in the fire, that fire I had accidentally started at the age of 12. And I thought about Lysander Sterling, with his color-changing eyes, and his purring chair, and his impossible offer of protection. What do I get out of this? I asked, because I was practical if nothing else. Security, he said. Financial and physical. A place to stay. And he reached into a desk drawer, pulling out something he tossed my way. Gloves. I caught the package in the air. They were black, sleek gloves, made of some material that looked like high-tech rubber. Insulating, he explained. Made for electricians who work with high voltage. They aren't perfect, but they should help contain your surges. I looked at the gloves, then at him. You had this prepared? I read about human batteries 10 years ago, he said, and I never discard useful information. Something in my chest tightened. He had insulating gloves in a drawer for 10 years, just in case. Just because he had read about people like me once. Okay, I said before I could stop myself. I'm in, but only until I can pay off my debts and find something more stable. After that, we fake an amicable breakup and go our separate ways. Lysander stared at me for a long moment. His eyes were green again, cold and calculating. But there was something else there. Something I couldn't name, hidden in the depths. Agreed, he finally said. We stared at each other across the smoking desk and the dead laptop and the utter absurdity of the situation. And so, with a handshake I couldn't give for obvious reasons, I became the fake fiancé of the Alpha of New York. What could possibly go wrong? 3 days later, I was being squeezed into a dress that cost more than everything I had ever owned in my life, while Barnaby paced back and forth, reciting a list of names I was supposed to memorize. Then we have the matriarch of the Ashworth clan, he said, his glasses slipping down his nose as he consulted the tablet. She will try to intimidate you. Do not make prolonged eye contact. It is considered a challenge. Then there is Counselor Vance, who is allergic to perfume, so for heaven's sake don't wear any. And of course, Blythe Halloway will be there, so... Barnaby, I interrupted, squirming as the stylist tightened something across my back. I can't breathe. Breathing is optional at gala events, he said distractedly. Looking flawless is mandatory. I cast a murderous glance at the mirror in front of me. The woman staring back was unrecognizable. Red hair tamed into elegant waves that defied all the static I usually produced. Subtle makeup that made my eyes look bigger, more dramatic. And the dress, an emerald green number that hugged curves I didn't even know I had, with a neckline that was elegant, but definitely attention-grabbing. I looked like a very well-disguised imposter. The gloves, I said suddenly. Where are the gloves? Barnaby pointed to a box on the vanity. Lysander had them custom-made. They matched the dress. I picked up the box and opened it. Inside were a pair of long gloves, the same emerald green as the dress, made of that insulating material, but covered with silk on the outside. They were beautiful. They were practical. They were exactly the kind of detail I would never expect from a man who looked carved from ice. He thought of everything, I murmured. Mr. Sterling is meticulous, Barnaby said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like affection, especially when it comes to things that matter to him. I put the gloves on slowly, feeling the material fit my fingers perfectly. For the first time in years, I could touch things without fear of destroying them. It was a strange feeling. Liberating. The bedroom door opened. I turned, expecting to see another assistant, or maybe one more person wanting to poke and adjust me. But it was Lysander. He stopped in the doorway, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. I had never seen him in a tuxedo before. It was different from the executive suit, more formal, more dangerous somehow. The black fabric hugged his broad shoulders like a second skin, and his dark hair was swept back in a way that highlighted the brutal structure of his face. He looked like a movie villain, the kind you know you should avoid but can't. His eyes swept over my body from head to toe, and I saw the green darken, turning almost black before flashing to gold for a fraction of a second. Green, he said, his voice rougher than normal. It suits you. My face flushed. Thank you. You are also presentable. Presentable. It was the best I could do. Anything more honest would have been humiliating. Barnaby cleared his throat. Sir, the limo is waiting. And I went over the protocol with Miss Vane, but perhaps you might want to... She will be fine, Lysander interrupted, still looking at me. I will be with her all night. The words shouldn't have caused the shiver they did. It was just a practical statement. Protection. Appearances. Nothing more. So why was my heart pounding like I had run a marathon? The banquet was on the terrace of the Obsidian Hotel, a place I only knew from photos in gossip magazines. The kind of place where celebrities and politicians mingled, where a glass of champagne cost more than my monthly electricity bill, where people like me usually only entered through the service door. But that night, I entered through the front door, on Lysander Sterling's arm. I could feel the stares. They followed us like spotlights, curious and calculating and, in some cases, openly hostile. Whispers erupted in our wake like fireworks. Who is she? Never seen her before. Where did she come from? The throne reacted. Impossible. Ignore them, Lysander murmured in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. They will talk anyway. Don't give them the satisfaction of looking affected. Easy for you to say, I whispered back. You were born into this. Doesn't mean I like it, he replied, and there was an edge in his voice that surprised me. Before I could answer, a woman materialized in front of us. Blonde, tall, wearing a silver dress that looked painted onto her. Beautiful in a cold, polished way, like a very expensive porcelain doll. Blythe Halloway. Lysander, she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. What a wonderful surprise. I didn't know you would bring... company. Her eyes turned to me, assessing me from head to toe with the kind of scrutiny that made you want to check if you had something in your teeth. Blythe, Lysander said, his tone perfectly neutral. This is Tamsin Vane, my fiancé. The silence that followed was deafening. I could swear even the background music hesitated for a second. Your fiancé, Blythe repeated, the words sounding as if each one hurt. How unexpected. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. And what lineage are you from, dear? She asked, turning to me. I don't recognize the surname Vane from any registered clan. I felt Lysander tense beside me. He was going to intervene, I knew. Was going to say something diplomatic and protective that would only make Blythe hate me more. So I opened my mouth first. Clorox lineage, I said, keeping my face perfectly serious. Originating from the Bleachwater region. Perhaps you're familiar? Blythe's jaw dropped. Lysander made a strange sound, something between a cough and a gasp, which I suspected was suppressed laughter. I don't... Blythe stammered, completely disarmed. If you'll excuse us, I said sweetly, sweeping past her with Lysander still on my arm. My fiancé promised me champagne. We moved away before she could regain her composure. When we were at a safe distance, Lysander leaned in and murmured in my ear. Clorox lineage? She asked. I replied. I answered. You are impossible, he said, but there was warmth in his voice. Admiration, perhaps. I know, I answered. It's part of my charm. He looked at me in a way that made my stomach flip, and for a second, just 1 second, I forgot this was a farce. The rest of the night passed in a blur of faces and names and conversations I pretended to understand. I met Matriarch Ashworth, who truly tried to intimidate me, and looked visibly confused when I simply smiled and asked if she had tried the canapes. I met Counselor Vance, who sneezed 3 times just looking at me, despite my wearing no perfume. I met dozens of high society wolves who looked at me as if I were a stain on the expensive carpet of their lives. And through everything, Lysander stayed by my side. Solid, present, his hand occasionally finding the small of my back, a light but possessive touch that made my skin tingle even through the fabric of the dress. We were in the middle of a particularly boring conversation with an investor when the buzzing started. Low at first, almost imperceptible, but I recognized it. I always did. Approaching technology. My head turned automatically, searching for the source. And then I saw them, small black dots against the night sky, moving too fast to be birds. Drones. Lysander, I said, squeezing his arm. I know, he replied, his voice tense. I feel it. The drones plunged. The chaos that followed was instantaneous. People screaming, running, dropping to the floor. Waiters knocking over trays. Champagne flying through the air like golden rain. The drones were firing something, not bullets, but darts, and wherever they hit, people fell unconscious. Tranquilizers, Lysander growled, shoving me behind a column. Someone is trying to capture, not kill. Who? I asked, my heart hammering. He didn't answer. His eyes had already turned gold, his pupils elongating, and I could see his skin rippling, bones rearranging beneath the surface. Don't leave here, he ordered, his voice distorted by the onset of the shift. No matter what happens. And then he was gone. Where before there was a man in a tuxedo, now there was a wolf, black as night, enormous, the size of a small horse, golden eyes burning with murderous fury. He leaped toward the drones with a growl that vibrated my bones. I stayed behind the column, as he commanded, for about 30 seconds. Then one of the drones found me. It appeared out of nowhere, hovering in front of me, the red camera flashing as it scanned me. I could hear the buzz of the propellers, feel the electricity running through its circuits. And something inside me answered. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My body acted on instinct, my hands rising, my fingers stretching toward the drone, and all the energy I had spent my entire life trying to contain simply came out. The pulse was like a silent explosion. I saw it expand from me in invisible waves, feeling more than seeing the impact. The drone in front of me fell dead to the floor. Then another, and another, and another. The terrace lights flickered and went out. The music died. The drones, all 17 remaining, plummeted from the sky like stones. And then there was silence. I stood in the dark, panting, feeling every cell in my body vibrate with the effort. My eyes, I knew without needing a mirror, must be glowing that neon white that always appeared when I overloaded. Emergency lights flashed, bathing the terrace in red. And in the middle of the chaos, among the unconscious bodies and destroyed drones and general panic, a giant black wolf stood staring at me. His golden eyes were wide, not with fear, with something I couldn't identify. He came toward me, his enormous paws silent on the marble floor. I should have been afraid. A pony-sized wolf approaching after I had just unleashed an electromagnetic pulse was probably not a safe situation. But I wasn't afraid. When he stopped in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body, I did the only thing that felt right. I reached out and scratched him behind the ear. The wolf froze. And then, to my absolute astonishment, he lay down on the ground and rolled over, exposing his belly. "Who's a good killer boy?" I heard my voice say, hysterical and affectionate at the same time. "You are. Yes, you are." The wolf, the prime alpha of New York, the most powerful man in the lupine corporate world, batted a paw in the air as I rubbed his stomach. The emergency lights kept flashing. People groaned around us, slowly waking up. And I was there, in a gala dress and silk gloves, petting a giant wolf that purred like a kitten. When he finally shifted back, Lysander was lying on the marble floor, completely naked, with an expression of absolute mortification on his face. "We are never," he said, his voice husky, "going to talk about that." I looked down at him, at the green eyes that still held sparks of gold, at the face that was red with embarrassment for the first time since I'd known him. I smiled. "Too late," I said. "That's going to keep me warm on cold nights for the rest of my life." He closed his eyes and sighed, and somewhere distant, I could swear I heard the moon throne purring with satisfaction. The chalet was ridiculous. Not ridiculous in a bad way. Ridiculous in a, this is not a cabin, this is a mansion pretending to be rustic sense. Dark wood walls, yes, but with underfloor heating. Stone fireplace, of course, but controlled by a digital panel. Huge windows showing a forest that looked ripped from a fairy tale, with trees so tall they blocked the moonlight. And absolutely no sign of Wi-Fi. Lysander had brought me here immediately after the banquet disaster. He said it was a safe haven, a place few people knew about, completely off the radar. The kind of place where no one could find us. The kind of place where I was completely alone with him. I huddled on the sofa, still wearing the green dress because my clothes were in a suitcase Barnaby was supposed to send later, and watched Lysander pace back and forth in front of the fireplace. He had found clothes here, gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt that hugged his muscles in a way I was trying very hard not to notice. He hadn't stopped pacing since we arrived. 15 minutes of measured steps, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor. "You're going to wear a hole in the carpet," I finally said. He stopped, looked at me, and I saw that he was still mortified. "The belly rub incident," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "That was adorable," I finished. "The word you're looking for is adorable." "No," he said firmly. "That is definitely not the word. Alphas aren't adorable. Alphas are fearsome, respected, powerful. Alphas apparently also like belly rubs," I said, unable to suppress a smile. "Who knew?" Lysander closed his eyes and let out a long sigh, the kind that seemed to carry the weight of centuries of lupine dignity being crushed by a red-headed janitor with electrical problems. "My wolf," he said slowly, as if each word pained him, "does not usually react like that. With anyone. Ever." "But he reacted to me," I said. "Yes. Why?" He opened his eyes. "Because you are my mate, Tamsin. The bond. It affects everything. My rationality, my control, my instincts. Near you, my wolf doesn't want to dominate or protect in the traditional sense. He wants to..." He paused, seeming physically unable to finish the sentence. "Belly rubs?" I offered. Lysander gave me a look that would have silenced any sensible person immediately. I was not a sensible person. "You know," I said, settling deeper into the sofa. "For a guy who just found out his soulmate can fry an entire building's electrical system, you're awfully focused on the wrong thing. Dr. Pym, whoever that is, sent drones to an event full of important wolves. Isn't that a bit more worrying?" His expression changed immediately, the shame giving way to something colder, more calculating. "Pym is a problem I will deal with," he said. "But first, I need to understand what you are." "A janitor with chronic bad luck," I replied automatically. "You know what I mean." I knew. Of course I did. But talking about it meant opening doors I had kept locked for a long time. Doors that held memories that still burned. Lysander must have seen something in my face, because he stopped pacing and came to sit at the other end of the sofa, far enough away not to pressure me, close enough that I felt his warmth. "You don't have to tell me," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "But I need to know what I'm protecting. And from whom?" The silence stretched between us. The fireplace crackled. Outside, a gentle wind made the trees whisper secrets I didn't understand. And then, without really deciding to do it, I started talking. "My parents were scientists," I said, looking at the flames instead of him. "Geneticists. They worked for a research company studying rare mutations. When I was born, they realized there was something different about me. I made the lights flicker when I cried, fried the hospital monitors just by being nearby." I paused, the memories rising like bile in my throat. They studied me. For 12 years, I was their private guinea pig. Tests, measurements, experiments. They wanted to understand how I worked. They wanted to replicate it. Lysander didn't say anything, but I felt him move, closing the distance between us almost imperceptibly. "The fire started in their lab," I continued, "in the back of our house. I was 12 and I was angry because they had canceled my birthday to run more tests. I screamed, stomped my feet, threw a tantrum. And then, my voice failed. "You overloaded," Lysander said, not as a question. I nodded, my eyes burning. I had never released that much energy at once. The lab exploded. The house caught fire. My parents, I couldn't finish. I didn't need to. The rest was written in the scars that covered my hands beneath the gloves. Scars I hid from the world along with everything else. The silence that followed was different from the previous one. Heavier, kinder somehow. "You were a child," Lysander said finally. "You had no control. I killed my parents." "You were a child," he repeated, his voice firm. "What happened was an accident. It is not your fault." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You don't understand. I destroy everything I touch. That's why I work at night, alone. That's why I have no friends, no relationships, no nothing. Because eventually, inevitably, I'm going to hurt someone again." Lysander moved. Before I could react, he was right in front of me, his knees almost touching mine, his forest green eyes burning with an intensity that stole my breath. "Give me your hand," he said. I instinctively pulled back. "You saw what happened to your phone. Give me your hand, Tamsin." His voice left no room for discussion. It was an alpha's order. Charged with authority, I could feel vibrating in the air between us. I shouldn't have obeyed. Every survival instinct I had developed in 23 years of accidents told me to run, to hide, to protect him from me. But there was something in his eyes, something I had never seen directed at me before. Trust. With trembling hands, I began to remove my right glove. Lysander watched in silence as the material slid off my fingers, revealing skin scarred by old burns, the white lines that told the story of that night 11 years ago. I waited to see repulsion, pity, fear. Instead, he held out his own hand, palm up, an offering. "I am the Alpha," he said, his voice deep and certain. "I can handle the voltage. You don't know that. Then let's find out together." My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. Slowly, centimeter by centimeter, I lowered my hand toward his. The first touch was like diving into electrified water. I felt the current run up my arm, pulse in my palm, jump to his skin. Literal sparks danced between our fingers, tiny blue and white lightning bolts that illuminated the space between us. Lysander did not pull away. His eyes instantly turned gold, his pupils dilated, and I heard that low growl start in his chest. But it wasn't a growl of pain. It was something more primitive, more hungry. "More," he said, his voice distorted. "I can take more." I should have stopped, should have let go of his hand and run to the other side of the chalet. But something in me, something that had been locked up for too long, refused to back down. I intertwined my fingers with his. The energy exploded. Not destructively, not like the fire or the drones or the $10,000 cell phone. It was more like a discharge. Weeks, months, years of repressed electricity finally finding a place to go. Lysander absorbed it all, his entire body shaking with the voltage, his eyes so golden they looked like miniature suns. The chalet lights flickered, but did not go out. The fireplace crackled louder, then calmed down. And then, as suddenly as it began, the discharge stopped. I was gasping as if I had run a marathon. My skin tingled, but not in the bad way, not the way that meant I was going to explode. It was a tingling of relief, of release, of something I hadn't experienced in over a decade. Empty. I was empty, at least for now. Lysander still held my hand. His eyes had returned to green, but there was a sheen there, a raw admiration that made me want to look away. "You," he said, his voice husky in a way that made my stomach clench, "are the most extraordinary thing I have ever encountered." "I'm a walking disaster," I corrected, but my voice was weak. "You are mine," he said, and this time the words didn't sound like a claim. They sounded like reverence, "and I am yours." The bond is not a prison, Tamsin. It's a circuit. You discharge, I absorb. You overflow, I contain. We balance each other. I stared at our intertwined fingers. The sparks had stopped, but I could still feel the connection, like an invisible thread linking my heart to his. "I'm scared," I admitted in a whisper. "Scared of hurting you. Scared of destroying this before it starts." Lysander brought our joined hands up to his face, pressing my palm against his cheek. I felt his stubble scratch my skin, felt his warmth, felt the pulse beating hard in his jaw. "I am the Alpha," he said again, but this time the words had a different weight. "I have survived clan wars, assassination attempts, decades of solitude waiting for you. A few sparks won't destroy me. What if I can't control it?" "Then we train together," he said simply. "You learn to channel, I learn to absorb more. We figure it out." "Why do you care so much?" I asked, the question escaping before I could contain it. "You've known me for 3 days." His eyes softened. "I waited 500 lunar cycles for my mate, Tamsin. 500 months waking up alone, feeling the incomplete bond like a hole in my chest. And then you sat on that throne, and it chose you. And my wolf knew before I knew. And suddenly the hole wasn't there anymore." He leaned closer, so close I could feel his breath on my lips. 3 days, or 3 decades, he said. "You are mine, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you are also extraordinary, until you believe it." And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't hesitant. It was the kind of kiss that consumed, that claimed, that branded. His lips were hot and demanding against mine, and I felt sparks, literal sparks, explode where our skin touched. His free hand found the nape of my neck, pulling me closer, and I got lost in him, lost in the taste of storm and power, lost in the heat radiating from him like a furnace, lost in the sound he made when I ran my fingers through his hair and tugged. The fireplace roared louder behind us. The chalet windows rattled in their frames. Somewhere outside, thunder echoed in a sky that had been clear minutes before. When we finally separated, both panting, both trembling, I looked into his eyes and saw the gold and the green mixing, dancing, impossible and beautiful. "That," I said, my voice destroyed, "was electric," he finished, a corner smile. The first real smile I'd seen on him, curving his lips. "Literally," I laughed. A real clean laugh, the kind I hadn't made in years. "You're terrible," I said. "And you are mine," he replied. "So I guess that makes us perfect for each other." Outside, the storm I had accidentally created continued to roar. But inside, in the arms of the Alpha who had absorbed my electricity and kissed me as if I were the air he needed to breathe, I felt safe for the first time since I was 12. Maybe it was illusion. Maybe it was the bond deceiving me. But when Lysander pulled me closer and started kissing my neck, whispering promises that made my skin burn, I decided I didn't care. At least for that night, I was going to stop being the girl who destroyed everything, and was just going to be his. I woke up alone. For a moment, lying in that absurdly soft bed that wasn't mine, with sheets that smelled of pine and something wilder. I thought I had dreamed everything. The banquet, the drones, the kiss, the storm I had created when Lysander touched me as if I were something precious instead of dangerous. But then I saw the mark on my wrist. It wasn't a physical mark, Not exactly. It was more like a tattoo made of light, golden lines that pulsed softly beneath my skin, forming a pattern I didn't recognize but which felt, somehow, familiar, as if it had always been there, waiting to appear. The bond. I ran my fingers over the lines, feeling a gentle warmth emanating from them, and along with the warmth, something else. A consciousness that was not mine, a presence at the edge of my mind, like someone waiting on the other side of a door. Lysander. I could feel him. Not his thoughts exactly, but his essence. He was worried, tense, and very, very close. The bedroom door opened before I could get up, and Barnaby entered, his glasses crooked and his hair disheveled in a way I had never seen him. "Put this on," he said, throwing a backpack onto the bed. "We have to go. Now." "What? What's going on? Where is Lysander?" "He went to check the perimeter. We detected an energy reading anomaly 10 minutes ago. Something is approaching." The blood in my veins turned to ice. Something? What kind of something? Barnaby looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw real fear in his eyes. "The kind that took down our containment shield," he said. "The kind that knew exactly where to find us." I didn't need any more explanation. I dressed in record time, swapping the green dress for jeans, a t-shirt, and a sweatshirt that was clearly Lysander's, too big and smelling of him in a way that made my heart clench. The insulating gloves were the last things I put on, my fingers trembling as I adjusted them. When I left the room, the chalet was plunged into an unnatural darkness. The windows that yesterday showed the moonlit forest were now rectangles of absolute blackness. No stars, no moonlight, nothing. "This isn't normal," I whispered. "No," Barnaby agreed. "It's not." A howl cut through the silence. Lysander. But it wasn't the howl I had heard before, that sound of power and command. This one was different, urgent, a warning. And then the wall of the chalet exploded. I was thrown backward, hitting something solid before falling to the floor. Dust and debris rained down around me. My ears were ringing, my vision was blurred, and for one terrible second I couldn't breathe. "Tamsin!" Lysander's voice cut through the chaos. I lifted my head and saw him, still in human form, but with his eyes completely golden, fighting something I couldn't identify in the smoke. No, not something. Someone. Several people, actually. Figures dressed in black, moving with a mechanical precision that didn't seem entirely human. And behind them, emerging from the wreckage as if taking a casual stroll, stood a man. Short, bald, wearing a white coat stained with grease, round glasses perched on a pointy nose, and an expression of utter boredom on his face as he observed the chaos he had created. "Dr. Orson Pym," Lysander growled, knocking out 2 of the attackers with a single blow. "I should have known." Pym sighed, the sound exaggerated and theatrical. "Alpha Sterling, always so dramatic. I just want the girl. Give me the girl and maybe, just maybe, I won't destroy the rest of your property." I struggled to my feet, my legs shaking. The mark on my wrist pulsed frantically, too hot, almost burning. Lysander moved, placing himself between me and Pym. "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged," Pym said, and there was something in his voice, a monotony that was almost scarier than anger. "But it would be a waste. Do you have any idea of the potential your little mate carries?" "I don't belong to anyone," I said, my voice coming out firmer than I felt. "Especially not you." Pym looked at me for the first time, the eyes behind the glasses evaluating me as if I were an interesting equation. "Ah," he said. "The battery speaks. Fascinating. Tell me, do you know what you truly are? What your parents were trying to create when they accidentally produced you?" My blood ran cold. "My parents? Brilliant scientists," Pym continued, starting to walk in a slow circle. "A shame they died before completing the project. But don't worry, I have all their notes. And with you in my lab, I will finally finish what they started." The truth hit me like a punch to the stomach. Pym had worked with my parents. Pym knew about me from the beginning. The fire, the years of solitude, all of it. He had been watching, waiting. "You're a monster," I said. "I am a scientist," he corrected with boredom. "Monsters are inefficient." Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way. You come with me voluntarily, and I promise not to turn your pet wolf into a rug. The growl that tore out of Lysander made the walls shake. Hard way, then, Pym said, almost sounding pleased. Capture her. Kill the alpha. Everything happened too fast. The figures in black advanced. Lysander shifted in motion, bones cracking, skin tearing, and suddenly the black wolf was there, enormous and furious, his teeth gleaming in the dim light. Barnaby appeared out of nowhere holding something that looked like a flamethrower, his hands shaking but his face determined. And I ran, not out of cowardice, out of instinct, because I knew, deep down in my being, that if I stayed there, Lysander would be distracted protecting me. And distraction meant death. I ran toward the back of the chalet, hearing the chaos behind me. Growls, shouts, the hiss of weapons being fired. The forest swallowed me, branches scratching my face, roots trying to trip me at every step. But I wasn't running away. I was luring. If Pym wanted me, he would follow me. And if he followed me, Lysander would have a chance to defeat his henchmen. The plan worked. Almost too well. I had run perhaps 200 yards when the net fell over me. Not an ordinary net. Something heavier. More technological. The material was rubberized, insulating. And the moment it wrapped around me, I felt my powers snuff out like a candle being blown out. I fell to the forest floor, struggling. But the more I fought, the tighter the material became. Kinetic energy, Pym's voice said from somewhere above me. The more you move, the tighter it squeezes. Fascinating technology, if I do say so myself. I stopped fighting. I had no choice. Pym appeared in my field of vision, looking down at me with that scientific boredom. You know, he said, kneeling beside me, your parents truly loved you. In their own twisted, obsessive way. They wanted to understand your power so they could protect you from the world. But I have different goals. What do you want? I asked, my voice muffled by the net material. What every scientist wants, he said simply. Progress. You are a source of unlimited energy, Miss Vane. Imagine what I could do with that energy. Entire cities powered by a single person. Armies of cybernetic wolves that never need rest. A perfect, efficient, controlled world. You're insane. I'm a visionary, he corrected. There is a subtle difference. He gestured, and two of the figures in black appeared, lifting me off the ground as if I weighed nothing. I tried to struggle again, but the net only tightened, cutting off my breath. Lysander! I yelled through the bond, not knowing if it would work, not knowing if he could hear me. For a second, nothing. And then, like thunder in my mind, I'm coming, hold on, I'm coming. Relief and terror mixed in my chest. He was coming. But Pym had planned this. Pym had set traps. If Lysander came running blindly. No, I screamed back. It's a trap. He wants you to come. Silence in the bond. And then, softer, more determined. I know, but you are my mate. There is no trap in the world that can stop me from reaching you. Idiot, I thought, but there were tears in my eyes. Idiotic, stubborn, impossible alpha. They carried me to a clearing where a helicopter waited, its blades already spinning. Beside it, a metallic structure that looked like a giant cage, with cables and monitors connected at every angle. The grid, Pym said, almost lovingly. My mobile lab. You'll like it. It has a view of the destruction. They threw me inside the cage, the net finally coming off only to be replaced by metal shackles that clamped around my wrists and ankles. I pulled, expecting to feel that familiar surge of energy, but nothing happened. Suppressors, Pym explained, typing something into a console. As long as you wear these shackles, your power is contained. Completely harmless. For the first time in your life, you are normal. He said the last word like it was an insult. Now, he continued, let's run some initial tests. Don't worry, I rarely kill my experiments in the first session. He pulled a lever, and the world turned into pain. I screamed. I had no choice. It was as if every cell in my body was being ripped out and rebuilt at the same time. The energy I had spent my entire life containing was being forced out of me, sucked by cables and machines that whirred around me. Fascinating. I heard Pym mutter through the haze of agony. The output is beyond my projections. With the right adjustments, a single session could power Manhattan for a month. I couldn't answer. I could barely think. Everything was pain and light and the sound of my own heart beating too fast, too weakly. And then, through everything, I felt it. Lysander. Not through the bond this time. I felt him approaching physically, a wave of fury and power that made the air vibrate. Pym's henchmen shouted warnings, guns being cocked, orders being barked. But it was too late. The black wolf burst into the clearing like a force of nature. I saw, through eyes that could barely focus, Lysander tear apart two guards with a single swipe. I saw Barnaby appear behind him, the flamethrower finally being used, jets of fire lighting up the night. I saw Pym retreat, his face finally showing something other than boredom. Fear. "Alpha Sterling," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Be reasonable. She is just a human. You can find another mate, one more appropriate for your status." The growl that came out of Lysander was entirely inhuman. He charged toward Pym, but the scientist was faster. He pulled something from his pocket, a remote control, and pressed a button. "One more step," he said, "and I increase the extraction to 100%. She won't survive." Lysander stopped. I could see him through the fog of pain, the huge wolf standing in the middle of the clearing, his golden eyes fixed on me. I could feel his agony through the bond, the desperate need to reach me fighting against the fear of losing me. "Lysander," I said, my voice coming out as a broken whisper. "I have an idea." His eyes widened. Through the bond I showed him. Not words, not thoughts. Just an image, a memory, the throne, purring beneath me, me discharging into it, him absorbing everything. "Trust me," I pleaded. A second of hesitation. Then, through the bond, soft but certain, always, I closed my eyes, and I let everything go. When I was a child, before the fire, before everything, I used to have nightmares about turning into light. It wasn't a beautiful dream, as you might imagine. It was terrifying. I felt my body dissolve, every cell converting into pure energy, and there was no way back. I simply disappeared, turned into electricity without form, without thought, without soul. For years I was afraid that dream was a prophecy. In that moment, trapped in Pym's machine, I discovered it wasn't. It was a promise. I didn't fight the extraction. For the first time in my life, I stopped resisting my own power. I stopped holding back, stopping containing, stopping being afraid. Instead, I opened the floodgates. All of them. The energy that poured out of me was not sucked up by the machine. It was too much, too fast, too violent for any technology to process. The cables connected to my shackles began to smoke. The monitors around me exploded in a cascade, one after the other, like fireworks of fried circuits. Pym shouted something, but I couldn't hear. The world had become a white roar of pure power, and in the center of that chaos, I found the bond. It wasn't a thin line as I expected. It was a bridge, a superhighway of golden light connecting my heart to Lysander's, pulsing with an intensity that equaled my own energy. I pushed everything across that bridge. Every volt, every spark, every drop of electricity my body had stored in 23 years of containment, I sent to him. And Lysander, my impossible, stubborn alpha, received it all. Through my light, half-blind eyes, I saw him transform. The black wolf grew, not physically, but in presence, in power. Electricity ran through his fur like veins of lightning, his eyes glowing so brightly they looked like two miniature suns. He was magnificent, terrible, mine. Pym tried to run. He didn't even get 2 steps. Lysander was on him in a second, his enormous paws pressing the scientist into the ground. The electricity I had given him arced over to Pym in a perfect flash, and the man who had planned to turn me into a human battery convulsed once, twice, and then went completely still. Not dead. I could see his chest rising and falling faintly, but definitely out of commission. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the energy was gone. I was empty. Completely, utterly, wonderfully empty. The shackles, overloaded beyond repair, snapped and fell off. The cage around me was melted in some spots, smoking in others. Pym's helicopter was now just a skeleton of charred metal, and I was falling. My legs simply stopped working. The world spun, darkening at the edges, and I thought, with a strange calm, that maybe this was the end. Maybe I had given everything, literally everything, and there was nothing left to keep my heart beating. But then arms caught me, not wolf paws, human arms, warm and firm, holding me against a naked chest that still radiated residual heat from the transformation. "I've got you," Lysander's voice said, husky and broken in a way I had never heard. "I've got you, Tamsin. You were so brave, so extraordinary. But now rest, okay? I'll handle the rest." I wanted to answer. I wanted to make some joke about him being naked again, about Pym's hair probably being as frizzled as last time, about anything that would break the intensity of the moment. But my eyes closed, and the world disappeared. I woke up in my favorite place in the universe. Not the chalet, though that's where I was. Not the absurdly soft bed, though I was lying in it. No, my favorite place was much more specific. Lysander's arms. He was lying behind me, his entire body curved around mine as if trying to protect me even in dreams. One arm was draped across my waist, his hand open over my heart, as if he needed to feel every beat to make sure I was still there. I stirred, and the arm around me immediately tightened. "Don't move," his voice said, thick with sleep. "Barnaby said you need at least 48 more hours of rest. You almost died, Tamsin." "Almost," I said, my own voice scratchy. "But I didn't." Silence, then softer. "No, you didn't." He turned me in his arms, pulling me to face him, and when our eyes met, I saw something that took my breath away. Lysander Sterling, the prime alpha of New York, the most feared CEO in the corporate world, the man who looked carved from ice and control, had traces of dried tears on his face. "You cried," I said, genuinely shocked. He looked away for a fraction of a second. "You stopped breathing for 2 minutes. 2 minutes, Tamsin. My heart stopped with you." I raised my hand, still shaking with weakness, and placed it on his cheek. He closed his eyes at the touch, turning his face to press his lips against my palm. "Don't do that again," he said against my skin. "Please." "I can't promise," I said honestly, "but I can promise I will always try to come back to you." His eyes opened, green with golden sparks, that impossible mixture I was starting to love. "That," he said, "will have to do." And then he kissed me. It was different from the kiss in the chalet, before everything exploded. That one had been fire and hunger, and years of solitude finally finding a harbor. This was softer, sweeter, the kind of kiss that said, "I almost lost you, and I will never forget how that hurt." When we separated, I was crying too. "Hey," he said, wiping away the tears with his thumbs. "What is it?" "I never had this," I admitted, the truth escaping before I could contain it. "Someone who cried for me. Someone who cared if I stopped breathing. I spent so long alone that I forgot what it was like to be important." "You are important," Lysander said, his voice firm as steel. "You are the most important thing. And I will spend every day for the rest of our lives reminding you of that, until you believe it. That might take a while," I warned. He smiled, a real, wide-open smile that transformed his face into something almost unrecognizable. "Good," he said, "because I have no intention of going anywhere." 3 weeks later, I was sitting on the moon throne, not hidden like the first time, not trapped by energy shackles, unaware of what was happening. This time, I was sitting there because it was my right, my place. The throne had changed, or perhaps I had changed, and could now see what had always been there. The obsidian lines now glowed with a pattern that perfectly matched the mark on my wrist. And on the seat, because I insisted and Lysander couldn't refuse, there were 3 extra purple velvet cushions. "Comfort," I had explained when he questioned it. "Royalty doesn't need a sore back." He had rolled his eyes, but I saw the smile he tried to hide. Now he stood by my side as a line of clan representatives approached to pay homage. News of Pym's defeat had spread through the lupine world like wildfire. The story of how the Sterling Alpha's mate had destroyed an entire lab with pure electrical power had become legend before I even woke up. I was famous now. The Energy Queen, they called me. I preferred Tamsin, but no one asked my opinion. Blythe Halloway was the last in line. She looked different from the last time I saw her. Smaller somehow. The dress was still impeccable, the hair still perfectly styled, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't there before. Defeat. Alpha Sterling, she said, making a formal curtsy. Luna Vane. I blinked at the title. Luna. I hadn't gotten used to it yet. I came to apologize, Blythe continued, her eyes fixed on the marble floor. My behavior at the banquet was inappropriate, and I later learned that some of Pym's investors were associates of my family. We didn't know what he was planning, but the connection, it's not your fault, I said, surprising myself. You didn't know. And as for the banquet, I paused, remembering the expression on her face when I mentioned Clorox's lineage. I wasn't exactly diplomatic either. Blythe looked up, genuine surprise crossing her features. You are generous, she said slowly. I'm practical, I corrected. Holding grudges is too much work. I prefer to spend my energy on more important things. Lysander made that sound again, the near cough that meant he was trying very hard not to laugh. Blythe nodded, seeming unsure how to react to a Luna who talked like a janitor. She curtsied again and walked away, and I watched her go, thinking about how things had changed in such a short time. A month ago I was invisible, the girl who cleaned offices at night, who accidentally fried cell phones, who had no one in the world. Now I was a Luna, a mate, a legend in the making, and I still couldn't use a smartphone without causing permanent damage, but at least now I had pretty gloves to disguise it. The ceremony ended, the last representatives retiring, and finally Lysander and I were alone in the lobby. He turned to me, his green eyes soft in a way he only showed when no one was looking. You were incredible, he said. I was myself, I replied. Sometimes that's the same thing. He laughed, a low, warm sound that still caught me by surprise every time. The elevator door opened, and Barnaby rushed out, tablet in hand, the expression of controlled panic I had learned to recognize as his natural state. Sir, he said, slightly breathless. The power company bill has arrived. Lysander sighed. Barnaby, we discussed this. After the official ceremonies. Sir, Barnaby interrupted, and there was something in his voice that made me pay attention. The bill. He held out the tablet. Lysander looked, paled. I leaned over to see. The number on the screen had so many zeros that my brain refused to process it for a second. That's, I began. Pym's grid energy consumption, Barnaby explained. Apparently, when you overloaded his systems, the energy was redirected to the city's main grid. Technically, Sterling Global is responsible for... He kept talking, but I wasn't listening, because an idea had just popped into my head. A crazy, impossible, completely ridiculous idea. A perfect idea. I can pay that, I said. Both men looked at me. Lysander, I said, rising from the throne. If I can generate enough energy to power a mad scientist's cyborgs, I can generate enough energy to power useful things. Hospitals, schools, entire neighborhoods. He frowned, processing. Are you suggesting that I become a source of clean, renewable energy? I completed. Controlled, this time. With you absorbing the excess so I don't explode anything important. A circuit, remember? I discharge, you absorb. That would be... Barnaby started. Revolutionary, Lysander finished, and there was something in his eyes, that admiring glint that made me feel like I truly was extraordinary. It would be a lot of work, I said, and probably dangerous, and it's definitely going to fry some equipment in the process. Lysander took a step toward me, then another, until he was close enough that I felt his heat. Then it's a lifelong project, he said softly. Good thing I have a willing partner. I smiled. Partner, mate, walking power plant. I'm multifunctional. He kissed me right there, in the middle of the lobby, in front of Barnaby, who made a strangled sound and muttered something about giving the bosses privacy. When we separated, Barnaby's tablet was slightly smoking. Oops, I said. Lysander looked at the tablet, then at me, and started to laugh. A real loud, free laugh that echoed through the empty lobby. I will never be bored with you, he said. That's a promise, I replied. And as we stood there, in the Sterling Tower lobby, with a fried tablet and an astronomical power bill and a completely uncertain future ahead, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of my own power, because now I had someone to share the load. Someone who saw my electricity not as a curse, but as a gift. Someone who had fallen to his knees the first time he saw me and had never truly gotten up. My alpha, my mate, my complete circuit. And if sometimes I still fried the building's sound system, or made the lights flicker when I was particularly happy or scared, well, it was a small price to pay. After all, as Lysander liked to say every time I apologized for yet another piece of destroyed equipment, "You are worth every penny, Tamsin, and every volt." I usually replied by frying his new cell phone, just to prove he was right. Thank you for being here and for joining me for another story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you want, leave your comment. I love reading what you feel and think after each episode. Thank you for the love, and see you in the next story.